Welcome everyone to week 1 of skills training. So today we're going to start with mindfulness, and then we'll move into, we'll talk about mindfulness, and then we'll move into the first skill, which is the skill of finding wise mind. So those are two main goals for today. And I know we talked about this after the last 2 conversations that we had, that for people listening is going to be an intentional kind of shift from how we were talking, and you got this like kind of live feed of us talking through some topics. And what we landed on was that I want to create the space to model how I teach the skills in DBT skills training, so everyone can get a sense of what it looks like. I feel like people have lots of questions around skills training and like what happens in there. So here it is live. And then we're going to intentionally create some space for just talking about bringing these skills into leadership, into teams and organizations. So while some of our examples will be really specific for our niche, really these skills apply for everyone. So this should be applicable for all listening ears and the people that we work with. So I'm excited to jump into it.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be great. And for all of our, everybody who's listening out there, just remember that there is really no one size fits all approach to anything in life. And so I think as you listen, definitely would be an invitation for you just to consider like what resonates, what lands, where do you have questions? We're here for it.
Very true. Okay, so in our skills, we have 4 core modules that we float through, and we have mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness skills. And that's a lot. And sometimes we get questions around like, what skills do you start with, or where do you begin? And the answer for me has always been, and for most people who teach these skills, is we start with mindfulness. And the way I think about it is mindfulness is really the foundation that is necessary for all the other skills to work or to come into play. And mindfulness in general, if anyone's already familiar and has practices with it, that's fantastic. And the skills that we have that we'll teach and talk about will just really nicely apply to probably what you're already doing. And then for people who are brand new to this space, then hopefully the skills make it really accessible. Because I feel like the word of mindfulness can have lots of interpretations or lots of different meanings for people and practices. So I like that the framing of this helps to make it, hopefully makes it accessible, concrete tools to work with. Okay, so let's first try to define what we're talking about with mindfulness. And where I like to start actually is to think about the opposite and to define and talk about what it looks like to be on autopilot. So we might not have a clear definition of what mindfulness is, but oftentimes we know what the opposite is. Acting from that space of just doing things automatically and without much maybe intention or presence. So I guess maybe even Faith, just thinking for yourself right now, when you think about being on autopilot, like what comes to your mind, or what do you think about?
Oh man, when I'm on autopilot, it feels like my brain's offline. Like, you know how when you've done the same drive home a million times and then you walk in the door and you're like, wait a minute, I don't remember how I got here. You just kind of like, you went through the motions without really being like present with it. That's what I think of on being on autopilot, or just like I'm just not thinking somehow. It's more like a reactive space, but not like a super grounded and present reactive space. It's just kind of like, I don't know, my body's just going through the motions or something and just yeah.
Yes, totally. Okay, all of that is probably very relatable to lots of people. Absolutely. Yeah, that like just doing things out of habit, or you're so right, almost like that body like kind of root memory of like, oh, this is just about my day. This is how I start things off, or this is how I run a meeting, or work out a certain way. Um, and on the one hand, I think we can think about autopilot as like something that maybe saves us time. Like we don't have to really think about everything every time we go to do it. We can just do it. Um, and so it's not inherently wrong or bad or flawed. I think sometimes when we talk about it, people can then start judging themselves for being in autopilot, or when we start bringing awareness to like, oh my gosh, this is happening all the time. Like I'm doing this wrong, or whatever it may be. And it's just no, it's just what we do. Like we don't have to judge it. And the downside of being in a place of being on autopilot a lot, or spending a majority of our time there, is that one, it can lead to mistakes that we then have to spend time later fixing or kind of cleaning up. For anyone who's ever sent like an accidental text to maybe to the wrong person, or thought they were responding to one person on the email thread but responded to everyone, or
So real.
I share in my skills groups. There's usually evidence that I've been on autopilot. Like I'll find things that like aren't in the right place, or like totally like shouldn't be there. Like why is this thing here? Oh, great, I left it there. Or like leaving the coffee cup on top of the car and driving away. Like we were probably on autopilot, right? We were just doing things. So defining that and then thinking about what that looks like, then when we kind of flip it and we think about, well, what's the alternative? We start to formulate what being mindful looks like. And the way that I'm going to be talking about mindfulness is really just this like intentional presence in the current moment, or being present to the current moment. And it doesn't have to look a specific way. So sometimes when I talk about mindfulness, I ask people, well, what comes to your mind when you think about mindfulness? People a lot of times will think about meditation, or like a formal like seating meditation practice, which is a form of mindfulness practice, but it's its own thing. So that's one way that it can look like. What it can also look like is just being present to this moment right now. So if you're listening and you're following along right now, oh, guess what? You just caught yourself being mindful. If you and I are just engaged in this moment, maybe there's other things going on, but we can keep our focus here. That's mindfulness. So just the quality of our attention and our awareness to this present moment is mindfulness. And that act of bringing yourself back to the present moment, it's like flexing that muscle. And I really do think actually this practice of growing your familiarity with mindfulness and building the strength of being in that place of leading from a mindful place is no different than like building muscle strength of any other muscle in your body. You have to start somewhere, and then slowly but surely over time, when you do your reps and you increase your frequency or your weight, you get stronger and stronger. So the more we practice, the more accessible it becomes, and maybe the longer stints of feeling like our presence can linger is there. And so that's our intention. That's what we're going to be practicing.
It's very exciting. I think what I like about what you're saying right now is that to me, it kind of feels like the opposite of mindfulness is like when I'm really in my head and I'm just so caught up in my thoughts that I almost feel like I'm not seeing the world for what's happening in front of me. And so I feel like flipping that is like, even though we're calling it mindfulness, it's kind of just feels more like a state of awareness and presence at the same time. And just to say what you were just saying in slightly different words, yeah. I think the act of becoming aware and then like losing your awareness and then, becoming aware, noticing again, and then kind of losing that awareness. That's the rep that helps you build that muscle, that mindfulness muscle.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Just nailed it. Yeah. Okay. So I'm thinking about what are the inroads here? So the practice of returning our attention, the practice of being present to the moment. Where I typically tell people to start with this one is to see if you feel willing and you want to explore mindfulness and become more mindful, of practice this with things that you enjoy doing. So what are the things that are fun or that excite you or that feel good in some way? And can you focus just bringing your full attention to that? So if that's like, when you're around people that you love, or if that's you're doing, an activity, and that's really, again, enjoyable, can you see what it's like to really bring your full attention to that? And then part of this practice is then noticing what gets in the way and what makes it difficult. So I think this is a really important piece to talk about. One, just to normalize, because so much can happen and so much can get in the way. But then also to kind of equip ourselves for what are we going to do when those things show up. So a very common one that probably we can all relate to is just being distracted. There's so much going on at any given moment that our attention can get pulled in a million different directions. And especially these days with our phones that are constantly with us and pinging us and having information show up, or, so much of my life right now is happening on Zoom. And then on my computer, I have little pop-ups that show up and little things that just come into my field of awareness without even me wanting it to be there. And then my attention gets pulled from that. So what are the common things that distract us? Again, can I notice that? And then if my intention is to bring my full presence to this moment, when those distractions show up, how am I going to keep myself from either engaging with them, or when I find myself distracted again, how can I bring myself back? And that bringing yourself back part, I know I've already spoken to that a few times now, but there's a second piece to that, which is being really kind and gentle with yourself while you do it. So if you go to start practicing this, and every time you catch yourself being distracted or pulled away, and again, you kind of beat yourself up or berate yourself or really unkind to yourself, is there a net benefit there? Okay, you caught yourself, but you shamed yourself in the process. Like, that might deflate the whole practice. Or if it really entrenches that narrative, maybe that you're a bad person, or again, like you're not doing things correctly. We really want to try to pay attention to that. So we say part of mindfulness practice is being non-judgmental, and that includes with yourself. And then the other piece, which I feel like is the most challenging piece, that's Meredith's opinion, is we also talk about this idea of not being attached to the moment or having non-attachment. So why is that the hardest piece? So going back to thinking about something really positive. So I love spending time with friends. I'm thinking about a couple of friends I just saw over this last week. And when I'm there, I am like so happy to be with them. I'm ready. I'm like fully engaging. And then, I don't know, maybe something happens. Maybe they're getting distracted, or maybe they're talking about something that like is really difficult or challenging, or, oh, maybe we have conflict that we need to resolve. So if I'm attached to things looking and being a certain way, and that's the only time that I'm like truly happy or content, that can create a lot of tension, a lot of internal conflict, or make things difficult. So wanting to guide things or things to look a certain way is something we have to practice, like relinquishing control over. And again, seemingly simple, but really challenging and really hard. And I'm also, every time I talk about this, I laugh because before I got into therapy, I was in hospitality and did event planning, and my whole world was about controlling the environment or wanting things to go a certain way, or having all the systems in place for things to align a certain way. And so this can be really counterintuitive, or in so many of our fields, we train ourselves up a certain way to really want things to go a certain way. So the dialectic here is we can both want things to be a certain way and put all the systems in place to make that happen, and step back and acknowledge and let things be as they are. And then what is it like just to have full awareness and attention to that? And just be with that. reactions or thoughts to that? What are you thinking?
So I'm sitting here grinning like a Cheshire cat because it's like I'm thinking about running a company of almost like 200 people and just being like, ah, okay. It's like herding cats sometimes, right? Or you have that objective when you're going into the meeting of like, this is the single most important thing for us to talk about today, right? And then you find out that there's like some other thing that like really needs attention and is equally important. It is like, oh, how can you hold all these things that are true all at the same time? And just kind of do that dance of non-judgment, right? Uh, and also, yeah, just finding a way to kind of, like you said, embrace what is happening in the moment and still guide, especially as leaders when necessary. But
Yeah.
I was also smiling just because of the control thing. As someone who's grappled with anxiety quite a bit in my life,
Yeah.
that desire for control is so real because it's
Yep.
like the illusion of safety and predictability.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So, again, for inroads, just having awareness and just catching these processes, whatever shows up. It's just information. I think of it as like you're getting data. And then once you have that data, then we can start working with it. Okay. So like, is that a problem? Do I need to work? Do I want to fix that? Do something different? Okay. How do we do that? And what's the repeated effort? What's the repeated practice of continuing to come back to this? Okay. One more thing that I want to just tag, and then we can move into the first skill with this. Is like another kind of reasoning for like why to practice mindfulness. And there's a little visual that I'll pull up to show everyone that I usually create when talking about this. And that is, so right now we're all in the present moment. You tuned in with yourself and just took a little inventory. And again, sitting here, life is happening in this moment. And if we were just to sit and be here for some time, just notice our thoughts and saw what happened, our brain has a tendency to go in two directions. And so you're just naming that first direction, which is often the anxious generating direction, which is often future oriented thinking. So our brains can pull us into the future. And there's function there. Again, this is nothing to judge. There's function there. We can, plan ahead, think about what might happen, what's to come, equip ourselves best that we can for that. If anyone's ever had to give a speech before, you plan ahead. Or if anyone's a performer or an athlete, right, you do all the practice so you can then perform the day of. So again, a lot of pros being able to think into the future. And if we spend too much time in the future, that's where that anxiety can live. Oftentimes, catastrophes live there. What could happen? Is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? Oh my gosh, right?
Worst case scenario, yeah.
Yeah. Going back to my event planner days, if anyone's ever planned an event before, there could be so much anxiety that lives there, right? What if this? What if that? And if we, again, spend too much time there, that can be the outcome, feeling that anxiety, really like living in that state of being. And we get robbed of the present moment. So even in this present moment, I'm around people that I love, or I'm doing the thing that I love, but my brain's over here thinking about that. I'm going to be feeling the emotions that I'm going to be feeling are going to be more in line with what I'm thinking versus what's actually happening in front of me. Does that make sense? Okay, and similar, we can go in the other direction, where we can think back into the past and recalling memories, revisiting things. It's a very lovely ability of our brains and can have its own little traps. Could have done things better, or would have liked things to go a different way, or I should have done this or should have done that. And so this can be oftentimes a lot of places where like our depression can live. Or again, if we're in too much past oriented thinking, we can get stuck there. And that's the feeling state that's often kind of associated with too much time in the past, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And again, being in that place, we'll feel that. And then it also robs us of this present moment. So we've all been there, right? I'm here with my people, I'm doing the thing. Oh, but I'm thinking about what happened yesterday. Or I'm thinking about what happened a month ago, or the last time I got in a fight with a person. I'm replaying that. And that's just going to take me out of this present moment. So noticing it, if we fall into those two places, again, can we tag it? And then what do we do to bring ourselves back? And this is where it gets this is where I love the stacking of the skills over time. Because if we come back to the present moment, right now, the way I'm talking about it, we're kind of assuming that the present moment is like neutral or like net positive, right? Like, oh, I'm thinking about this fight that happened and come back to the present moment. It's just like this welcomed, lovely return. Sometimes that is true, and that can be true many times. And sometimes coming back to the present moment, there's discomfort in the present moment. Or I'm tuning back in here and I don't want to be here. So I'm going to go back in the past, or I'm going to think about the future, or daydream, or go somewhere else, right? So this is where a lot of the distress tolerance skills that we'll talk about are really helpful. Of how do we build the practice and the skillfulness of just tolerating what is, and seeing that I can be with that and I don't necessarily have to get away from it. So that being in that place of always just kind of like reactively just trying to get away from whatever it is that I'm experiencing creates its own set of of difficulties, and it creates like those ripple effects that can be really really challenging and hard to get out of, like lots of webs of behaviors that can be problematic. So that learning to tolerate what is, and again, not having to get away from it, is a skill set. And then what I've been naming before, like just being with what is and not judging it or not having attachment to it, that's also its own practice too. Okay, so that all being said, more skills to come that are going to help in this process. And where we start with in DBT, the first core skills is around this concept of what we call wise mind. So there's two kind of inroads here. We can just talk about the concept of wise mind. And then what we could also talk about, kind of similar where we started today, is what wise mind's not, what isn't wise mind, or what's the opposite of wise mind. So the framing for this is what we call 3 states of mind. So we have our logic mind as one state, or our reasonable mind. Our emotion mind is another state of mind. And then in between those two, this space in the middle is our wise mind. So the wise mind is like the synthesis or the integration of both those other states of mind. And by cultivating our mindfulness practices and understanding what the other states of mind feel like, we can also start to understand what wise mind feels like. And the idea here is, can we start, once we can identify that, can we tune into that more and then make our like informed, like embodied choices from a wise mind place? So am I moving? Am I doing things in alignment with my wise mind? Okay, so we'll start with reasonable mind or logic mind. 2 different names for the same thing. This is where our analytical brain lives, or analytical world lives. So anyone has ever been task oriented? You're probably in logic mind. And a task that we all have to do, if anyone's ever done taxes, things like that, math, looking at spreadsheets, things like that, like they're very oftentimes it's coming from a place of reason and logic and doing things a certain way. And the example that I like to give for this one is, you can think about pros and cons of having a logic mind. Lots of pros. Lots of organization, the roads that we drive on, the buildings that we live in, is all brought to you by very good sound reason, logic, structural engineering. Shout out to all those people out there doing that work. If anyone's ever put together a piece of furniture from IKEA, I say you probably had the experience of being pulled into the different states of mind, but hopefully you found that really reasonable mind to put it together. Is that one landing? That one's landing. Okay.
Uh-huh. Reasonable until you're like, this doesn't make sense.
If anyone's tried to put that furniture together from emotion mind, just based on like what it should, maybe what it feels like, maybe it didn't turn out quite in the style that you hoped for.
So humbling. I've done this before. I got this. I'm just gonna wing it. Yeah.
The way I like to think about both the states of mind, so let's just stay in reasonable mind for a moment. What I'm naming is just things or actions that tend to happen in reasonable mind. And there really is like a spectrum here of level of intensity. So at any given moment, we can all access reason and logic, or most of the time, right? And in its extreme form, when like a reasonable mind kind of crowds out the other two states of mind, it's like when our reasonable mind is just so strong that there's not room for for much of our emotions, or doesn't really feel integrated with my feeling side. Feels different than that wise mind kind of feeling. There's a variety of different reasons why that can happen. We don't have to get into the weeds of that, but we can probably can all think about that. There's times like where you just went really hard on the logic and you just forgot about the other side. If there was like characters that kind of like embody this, like kind of classic ones that I offer would like think about like the Spocks of the world, or like the Sheldons out there, to kind of like embody more presence in reasonable mind, logic mind. Pros and cons of that, there's lots of pros, lots of beauties in that. And the cons where we see them maybe kind of struggle is more on that relationship level, or that like interpersonal side, which is often more like an emotion based way of being. So if that's helpful to kind of think about people in your mind or characters out there in the world. So now let's flip it and talk about emotion. So emotion mind. So we kind of have an idea about reasonable mind, structural engineering, and IKEA furniture and doing your taxes, things like that. And then we have this on the other side of the Venn diagram. We have emotion mind. Well, let me ask you: when you think about emotion mind, what comes to mind? What kind of lives there for you?
For some reason, my brain keeps going to Inside Out right now. That movie, where I'm just like picturing
Makes sense.
The emotions doing their thing, just like fully. I also think about kids a lot here, and it's just like pure fluidity between all of the emotional states. Just it's unpredictable and just like it feels so far removed from A plus B equals C. It is just like I feel quantum.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Inside Out did a great job of kind of modeling the different emotions and what happens there and what can happen. Kids for sure often are coming from this like very emotional base front.
I'm also going to like something like road rage, which is just like pure emotion and not any sort of logic.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. I love it. Yep.
We're all a bit there. Yep. So emotions. So lucky to have them all. We are all wired to experience emotions. We'll talk about a lot more emotions come, emotion regulation in that section. But for now, when we think about emotion mind, this is like more of like what we feel to be true. So reasonable is like what I like kind of think to be true. This is more like the feeling based. And pros and cons, pros of emotion mind is like So much comes with from emotions. So, like all the arts, music, connection, empathy. There's so many things that come from emotion, passion, right? Um, and again, this exists on a spectrum. So we have like lower intensities, like where our emotions are here, but maybe they're not running the show. And then the extreme end is when our emotions are so loud or so full encompassing that it crowds out all the logic or the reason in the moment, and we're not able to move forward in a place that we're able to access both. So emotion mind and extreme, we say emotion mind runs hot because it's typically hot. Lots of energy, it can be really loud. Um, I can't remember who are the characters that I give for emotion mind? And actually, I don't really know if I name characters per se because I think we can all really relate. So oftentimes, thinking about like being in or like stuck in like a strong emotion mind, um, people have their own personal examples that we can pull on, that we can think of like, oh yeah, last time like we got in a fight with someone, or last time we were really passionate about something. Oftentimes that feeling is more familiar. Um, okay, so what is wise? So wise mind. I think of like wise minds like you're taking like the strengths or the kind of the pros of both states of mind, and again we're like bringing it together, we're integrating it together, um, and that feeling place of wise mind is often one that holds both. So what is it that my emotion kind of self needs and wants, and what does my like logic and reasonable mind say about this? And like kind of what's the middle path, or what's this place where it all kind of coexists and can make an informed decision from there. Um, there's different words that people will put on like their wise mind. I like to use the phrasing of like this is kind of like what you know to be true. So if you kind of like slow down, we might try to convince ourselves and like what we think to be true, or we just kind of feel we really want it to be a certain way. But really, when we like know what I know to be true is this, that's our wise mind. Did I name intuition already? Did I say that one?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Sometimes people will name like their intuition. Um, and it's something that I just want to name too is that this is not, I'm not naming it today and like suddenly you have to go find your wise mind, like develop it. You already have it. Everyone already has it. We're just putting words onto this. And now that you have those words, can you start to see it for yourself? Or what do you know? Where do you notice feeling like in line with, both your emotions and your logic? Where do you feel like that most like balance, or it feels like, again, like what do you know to be true? And when you're making decisions that are in alignment with that, like what does that feel like? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the framing of it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I like to practice here is that maybe that sounds lovely, but I don't really know exactly what that looks like. But we'll often know what that emotion mind feels like and looks like. Or again, we'll often know what that reasonable mind feels like. Um, I have a tendency of falling into the trap of reasonable mind first thing in the morning when I make my list of to-dos in the day. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get all these things done. I have do. Oh, yeah, totally doable. And then the day starts. I'm like, what was I thinking? Oh, that was a reasonable mind trap. I woke up, not a ton of emotions present.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, with all the hours in the day, I can for sure get all these things done. Oh.
Wildly misunderestimated that one.
So using this as a tool, I like to think that if you can see those other states of mind, if we can just see it and notice it, that's wonderful. Now, I know that that's not wise mind, so let's just kind of see what happens. Like maybe I don't want to work with it, but let's just roll with it. Let's just go with it and see how this plays out. Or like, okay, I think this is like pretty reasonable minded. Is there any edits I can make to this list that might make it more wise minded, more realistic for like, the rest of the day? Um, or even like in that example, for me, when I name it that way, it kind of create some ease to it. Like this wasn't like a personal failure that I didn't get all this list done. That was just maybe off from the start. Maybe it wasn't fully capturing the essence of taking in, the multi dimensions of what was going to come up during the day. So just recognizing that we're in those states can be helpful from that perspective. And then also working with it. If I know, whoa, I'm in pretty high emotion mind, the question can become, is there anything that I can do right now that can help me bring down the intensity of that so that I can then try to access my wise mind? What can I do that might help pull me in a more centered place? Or same thing, like, this is really reasonable mind. Is there anything I could do that can try to like access maybe my emotional needs? Or for bringing this into like a team perspective, what information am I not thinking about? Or who could I talk to that might give me the other information that will help us make a more informed choice that takes into account all the other dimensions of this situation?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Because I think the thing that really resonated with me just now as you were talking through this is kind of, I like to think in continuums a lot of the time. And so you're like, okay, I'm thinking there's like the logic mind, there's wise mind, and then there's the emotion mind, right? This kind of emotion mind tends to feel hot, logic mind tends to feel cold. Like that alone feels like a helpful guide for me to like tap into at any given moment. A lot of the times when I'm working with my CEOs, I'll ask them, okay, in this moment, usually because I can see that they're way more in emotion mind, like they're super hijacked by something that's got them activated. I'll ask them, like, how much, if you put yourself on a scale right now of fact to feeling, where would you land in this moment? And a lot of the times that's helpful. The next question, though, usually has to be, what assumptions are you making? Like, what story are you telling yourself? Because I think the tricky thing about knowing is unless you check in with that or have a really strong awareness of what true knowing with like a capital K feels like in your body versus like, oh, well, I just know that that's what they're thinking. It's like, well, do you though?
Yeah.
That's a question I have to ask myself often. Yeah.
And I'm laughing because when you said, like, where are you on the scale right now, fact to feeling? Saying that emotion mind runs hot. The other thing that I usually say here is that emotion mind usually has like a strong sense of urgency behind it.
Yes.
Right? Like, oh, I gotta tell this person how I'm feeling right now. I gotta send that email like right now, right? And then even if you're in emotion mind, like, how are you fact or feeling right now? Like, well, it's facts for sure, right? Like in the moment, like how we respond, like it might feel like really like just kind of comes quick, or there, I don't know, urgency. I don't know. That example still feels like there's urgency behind it, the way we might answer.
Mm-hmm.
Or kind of like masquerade as like, oh yes, this is all the facts, but really it's emotion based. But I love that. I love that question because it just gives you that template of tuning in with yourself. And then again, becoming familiar with your own patterns and what kind of pulls us in different directions. If I have awareness, like, oh yeah, I often think that I'm in fact, but really this is like more feeling based, or this thing happens and I tend to be back in this place again. Okay, now that I know that, like, how do I work with that? Or at least just give myself some time to not make things worse, or to not keep acting from that place if it's not working out.
Yeah.
Working out like in my role or with the people that I'm with, or even for yourself, like if it's burning you out. Just noticing it and then beginning to work with it is awesome.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're also offering up maybe a place that people can kind of use as like a launch point for this. Like if anybody here wanted a homework assignment to write or an exercise to take away from this, to me, this sounds like this is could be a great launch point. Is accepting. I think the goal is not to always be in wise mind, right? It sounds like what you're suggesting is that there's an opportunity for anybody who wants to start practicing this to just check in with themselves and grow their awareness around where might you be?
Yeah.
Is that it? Would you
Yep.
like to stab it?
No, that's great. Yes, it's as and again, we'll talk about this more. And now that people are familiar with it, you'll hear us kind of use this language of like finding your wise mind or working from your wise mind. It sounds like a very lovely place to operate from because it's very integrated. It's like encompassing everything. And it's really challenging to always be in a state of wise mind. It's just like, I don't think it's humanly possible. So we're just constantly fluctuating between emotion mind, reasonable mind, wise mind all throughout the day. So at any given point, just checking in with yourself, where am I right now? And again, using those other states of mind as kind of like reflection points of like, oh yeah, this is clearly emotion mind, or oh yeah, it's clearly reasonable mind. Just to start, again, tuning in with yourself. Great place to practice.
Mm-hmm.
A great place to start practicing.
Yeah.
And then we'll build off of that of like, how do you cultivate wise mind, or how do we get more familiar with it? And again, how do we lead or lead with being from our wise mind place?
Yeah. And just reflecting on what you said earlier, the idea of just trying to suspend judgment, like be gentle with yourself and try not to attach to this too much.
Yep.
I make up that something that could be useful for that is maybe just labeling what's happening in the moment. Like, oh, noticing.
Yep.
Emotions running hot right now, right? Or, oh, yeah, coming in hard with logic in this moment. Cool. Just noticing.
Yep.
Logic mind, emotion mind.
Yes. And next time we meet, or next week, we'll go into the what and how skills of mindfulness, which are more kind of like tangible things to do, which we can that will absolutely help pull into this practice. And it all kind of comes together to have different things to pull on for a mindfulness practice.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, and I think the thing that's coming up for me right now as you're talking about this is I used to work with doctors, and one of the docs I used to work with was saying how really there are no flat lines in life. You look at all of your biorhythm readouts and stuff, your heartbeat, your brain waves, everything. It's all ups and downs, right? It's all this flow state. The only flat line is death. And so I feel like that personally has been a really helpful anchor for me whenever I find this desire internally to be like, God, why can't I just emotion mind find the sweet spot and not feel reactive or not feel super in my logic mind or what have you, and just honoring that the flow is part of the dance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I make up that that's probably a very common place that people maybe might struggle with.
Yeah.
This particular concept.
Totally. Yeah. Lots of assumptions and like, I think a lot of times it's like from our lived experience, like what's happened over the years or what we strive for, that can really paint this picture of what things should look like. And this practice is no different. We can have lots of thoughts around what this should look like or how we should be, acting or being or showing, like you're saying, showing up in the world or just feeling internally. So yeah, I love that framing. I definitely think of like a multi-dimensional framework there of lots of lines that are ebbing and flowing and moving around. And, how do we just acknowledge and see that as part of our lived experience without, putting judgments or demands on it to be different, but really just understanding that and then deciding, how do I want to be with that? How do I want to move with that?
Yeah.
Or what places does it best serve me to make choices from?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I also love to just say too, I heard you say should, and I feel like that's a really common word that I can hear when I'm coaching people, and I struggle catching myself sometimes. Should implies you have a choice. That's all. So you hear yourself saying, oh man, I should this, that, and the other. It's like, oh, interesting. Should. It just means I have a choice.
Yeah.
Let's okay. Noticing. Well, thank you. This is a great first exploration of the 3 states of mind. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us for our very first kickoff session with the DBT skills.
Yes.
We haven't said it already. If you like this podcast, follow us on your podcast apps and share if you'd like. And You can check out all the content that backs us up on our website at theonpointpractice.com. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can follow us on social as well, The On Point Practice or The Skills Podcast. And really looking forward to continuing this exploration or deep dive of DBT skills next time.
All right. I'll see you all then.
Yeah. See you soon.